Critical race theory, you hear about it every day. It's ubiquitous in the news. What is it? What's the origin of critical race theory? And what are the implications of this for our country, our future, and your freedoms? We're going to dive into this on today's edition of Truth for a New Generation. Critical race theory, that's our topic on today's edition of Truth for a New Generation. We welcome you. So glad you're here. Hi, Alex McFarland. And if there's one philosophy or news item that seems to have dominated headlines in recent months and years, it's been critical race theory. And you might be tempted to think this is some brand new idea that's just hit the streets. But in reality, on the program, we're going to hear from an expert in just a few moments. And we're going to learn how this really has been growing since the 1970s for more than 40 years. But what are the basics of this? I want to lay out what critical race theory asserts, what it is, and how I would say this is absolutely incompatible with our representative republic, but with our, and you've heard this countless times on the Truth for a New Generation programs, our Judeo-Christian moral foundation. Now, like so many ideas, like atheism or Darwinian evolution or Marxism, critical race theory is one of those philosophies that's been building, it's been sort of percolating back in the halls of academia, and then eventually it hits the streets. Like we've said on so many programs, ideas have consequences. And by the time something trickles down to street level, chances are there have been many decades that it's been building, and that is the case with critical race theory. Now, critical race theory says that racism is not necessarily a personal perspective or bias, but it is a systemic, structural part of the fabric of the DNA of our culture. In other words, racism and class distinctions and the exploitation and the oppression of minorities was not only built into the country, but was intentionally built into the country. Critical race theory says that you must see race in every interaction of life. Now, we know, let me be very clear, this show is based on a biblical worldview. The biblical worldview says that we are human beings, we're made by God, but we have a moral nature. And we also have a fallen sin nature. We've got this predisposition to evil and selfishness and narcissism, and I want my way. And very often, because people sin, we are dishonest with each other. We see opportunity, we leverage, and we exploit each other. And we are, in the biblical worldview and in the constitutional American worldview, we're all personally accountable. But in critical race theory, it's not about the individual, it's about the collective. It's very populist in the sense of there is not individual responsibility and accountability. In other words, the answer to racism is not that individual hearts and lives are changed. The answer is that society, culture, and government must be changed and really controlled. And inherently, in the American nation, racism has been built in purposely, intentionally, to perpetuate white privilege, says the critical race theorist. Now, in just a few moments, we're going to talk with a friend who's an attorney, and I would say an expert on this. He studied under one of the preeminent critical race theorists in the country, and the guest you'll meet in a moment will help us drill down a little more deeply and understand these things and why they really are more negative, and I would say draconian and dangerous than you can even imagine. Because critical race theory, please believe this, it's not just some abstract philosophy from the ivory towers of academia. This is a philosophy that threatens our Constitution and your liberties. And what makes this moment of time doubly tenuous, dangerous, if you will, is because there are so many people now, the 100 million strong millennial generation that have grown up in schools, maybe public education, where they've been just hearing America trashed and bashed. They've never seen America, a Judeo-Christian moral representative republic, at her best. And so we're at an especially vulnerable time because love for the nation and, frankly, understanding of our government and culture is at an all-time low. So critical race theory is something you need to know about, how we can respond to it, and why the future of this nation not only hangs in the balance, but it's actually in yours and my hands. So stay tuned and we'll learn more about this theory and how to deal with it on Truth for a New Generation.
Man, before I came to Charis, I was so broken.
I dealt a lot with anxiety and depression.
I didn't really realize I could have an actual relationship with God.
When I came here, I started to see God like, he just wants to have a relationship with me. It totally transformed the way I look at God.
God longs to have fellowship with you.
This is where faith comes from. It's not just head knowledge, Bible school knowledge, it's revelation knowledge that changes you.
Just been set free from a lot of the bondage I was in.
I haven't been depressed in so long.
Pretty awesome having that just weight lifted and putting on Jesus' yoke.
You come here and you meet God personally, and then He gives you a whole new direction.
This is a time, this is a season of your life that God's wanting to show you who you really are and what He's wanting to do in your life.
If you have a desire for Bible college, God's the one that put it there.
If you're considering coming to Charis, I just want to say it's going to be one of the best decisions you've made in your life.
Welcome back to Truth for a New Generation. We're talking about critical race theory. And to help us get a handle on this, we have a very special guest in the studio right now, Harold Eustache, an attorney. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Alice.
I've got a fond memory of my wife and I meeting you on a plane and then talking at the baggage claim in the airport here in central North Carolina. And we quickly found out we have a shared love of this country. And I want to say thank you for all that you do, but tell us about your work as an attorney and what brings you to the table of culture and theory on this topic of CRT.
Right now, I'm a criminal defense attorney in Winston-Salem. I've also been a prosecutor, so I've been on both sides of that world. So I practice in Forsyth County, mostly. I'm also vice chair of the Forsyth County Republican Party, so I'm involved in politics, and that's really what brings me to this table. I'm just passionate about our country. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I continue to do everything I can every day, waking up to say, what can I do for my country?
Well, let me say thank you for being a soldier, a veteran, and serving our country. And when you were in law school studying to become an attorney, you studied under one of the premier critical race experts, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. And I took critical race theory in law school. There was about 6 or 7 people in the class. And it was in 6 or 7 years ago, so it wasn't in the zeitgeist as it is now.
Right.
But I wanted to understand the theory. I wanted to understand what critical race theory was about, get a deeper understanding of it, and understand what arguments, if any, I could present against it. And so I think what I learned, one of the more crucial things I learned is how critical race theory started and why that's so important to what it's asserting about our country. It started in the 1970s, and it started against integration. And that's, a lot of us as a social construct, we've accepted that, we are a country where we believe that everybody is equal.
Which is a radical idea.
Which is a radical idea.
In the scope of nations,
it is. Absolutely. And we believe that our laws ought to be that way. What critical race theory says is that laws like anti-discrimination laws are really not good for minorities. And the reason is because it says that those laws only look at particular actions by individuals. So saying, well, if an individual does something discriminatory, we're looking at that action. What critical race theory is saying, there's a systemic problem and that the nation is systemically broken and has been at the outset. And so the only fix to that, from their perspective, is what's called equity. And that's why you hear about that in the news. And they try to trick people into thinking that equity and equality are the same thing when they are absolutely not the same thing.
Yeah, so let me lay this out. This is a radical idea that integration, and I was a product of that. I was in public school in the early 70s, and in first grade, I was at an all-white school. I don't think by intent, it just happened to be in a white neighborhood, but by second grade, we were integrated, and we were, you know, the desks were black, white, black, white. All that mattered to me at that age was who was best for the kickball team and who was going to be on my little league team, you know.
Right.
I actually look back on integration as, for me, a net positive. But you're saying in the mind of critical race theory that integration and getting people together is a bad thing?
Well, because there's this attack by CRT on race neutrality.
Okay.
So, you know, we hear a lot of conservatives talking about MLK recently, and the reason we're talking about that is because we're saying when MLK says that people should be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin, CRT is really against that because they believe that race neutrality only pushes what they believe to be white supremacy. So
they don't want a colorblind world.
No. I mean, colorblindness, they want to attack colorblindness. They think that colorblindness is the wrong way to go here.
So for the person who's an advocate of CRT, it's not neutrality that's the goal, but almost, I know they wouldn't say it, but retribution.
Right. No, I think they would say that. I think it is retribution. It is looking at our country as victims and oppressors, and looking at it through that lens. And I think it's obviously detrimental to the way that all of us, and especially all of young people, look at themselves, and the way that we look at this country as a whole. They, you know, the big lie about CRT is that it's really just about teaching truthful history. And that isn't what CRT is at all. There's nothing wrong with teaching our history, but CRT is trying to say that our history is a history that is totally corrupt from the beginning. And the only way to fix that system is to tear the entire system down. When the truth is, as you alluded to in your introduction, that subjugation of one human being to another is just part of human history. There's every civilization across the globe in human history has had to deal with subjugation. What makes America great and unique is our ability to rise above it, and this Constitution that we have, and our believing that our rights come from God, and that all men are created equal. That's what makes America America. Yes. What they say is, well, America has this lofty idea, but because we're humans, we don't live up to all those ideas. But instead of saying, well, there's no other nation that really even has these lofty ideas the same way that we do.
You know, Jefferson in the Declaration, when he wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." You know, takes us back to Aristotle, because self-evident truth meant undeniable. I mean, really, we need to acknowledge it because you can't deny it. And what is self-evident? That all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. In the scope of human governments, that is a bombshell, isn't it?
It is.
That opening paragraph of the Declaration. Harold, if you would speak to why this is so revolutionary.
It's so revolutionary because, again, we as human beings and as Americans, we have made a nation where all people can come together from all over the world in search of peace and be able to rise above, or attempt to rise above, our fallen nature as humans. And that is what, like I said, what makes us so unique as a people, as this country. I think what I would say for our viewers is that they need to be showing up and taking action against CRT. And the reason is because equity, what CRT's remedy to what they call systemic racism, is equal outcomes. And there's only one system of government that talks about equal outcomes, right? It's socialism.
Socialism,
it's
Marxism, yes.
Right?
Communism.
Right, and they say that we should have equal outcomes in everything, because if it's not, if the outcomes aren't equal, CRT says that the system is broken. So we ought to find ways to make the outcome equal, and the government should be making those outcomes equal. That's just classic Marxism, right?
Exactly.
And that's what we have to fight against.
And that sound we're hearing is our freedoms going out the window.
Right.
But because, do you know what, and I want to talk for just a moment about personal responsibility, because in the worldview of the founders and in the worldview of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I mean, we have a personal responsibility. We have accountability, we have responsibility, I believe we have opportunity, but for CRT, it's not about individual responsibility, it's about the collective and the whole, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, it's a collectivist idea that CRT has. I mean, it's at odds with individual liberty and individual responsibility. You know, again, it goes back to what I was talking about, those anti-discrimination laws. Looking at the individual and the individual's actions isn't what CRT wants to do. Mm-hmm. Again, when they look at a group and how a group succeeds or doesn't succeed, it's collectivist. They don't want to look at individuals and say, you as an individual can do anything that you put your mind to in this great country. If you work hard, wake up every day, and do the right thing, you can achieve something in the United States. They don't want that sort of individual look at the world. They want to say, if you are black, if you are a person of color, then you are barred from this sort of American dream, because the system is systemically racist. Now, the thing that's interesting about that is that a lot of times those same people that are telling young people that they can't achieve, telling young people of color they can't achieve, are people that are successful, that have achieved in the United States themselves and are a person of color. I find that to be...
So persons of achievement are telling others that they can't really be persons of achievement.
Right.
And myself as a Caucasian, white, if I wanted a fair, level playing field, equal America, that really means deep down I'm an oppressor.
That's what CRT says. I think it's unfortunate, and I think it's completely wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think we all would want in success to know that we actually worked hard to get whatever it is that you want in life.
Sure.
That the playing field was equal as it can be. The opportunity is equal as it can be, and you go forth from there. You know, when you compete in a sporting event, you know, you want to know, hey, we've got a neutral field. You know, the field is even for everybody, and you can go forth and compete, and whoever wins is the winner. That's what America's about.
Sure.
That competition that breeds innovation.
And it's good for us. It's good for our character. I'm going to say it's good for our soul to work hard, you know, put ourselves under strain and stress, and then become something beyond what we started out as.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we all strive to be. Instead of saying, you know, well, if I'm taking a test and you're taking a test, and we're both in the 6th grade, then I should get 20 extra points because of things that happened in the past. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want that 20 extra points. Yeah. And I don't think I think it's detrimental to our culture. It's detrimental to our society because, you know, now we're telling young people, we're telling young white kids that they're oppressors. We're telling young black kids and kids of color that they're victims. And it just feeds this psychological issue that we have, instead of telling kids that you're in a great country and that you can do anything that you put your mind to.
What would you recommend people do, Harold? Give us, in the couple of minutes we've got left in this segment, citizens that, I mean, now this is on their radar screen, this is on their field of vision. What could and should we do?
I think that people should attack this by a couple ways. Ideologically, attack it not by saying that everyone that believes in CRT is a terrible person, but, you know, have some grace, meet people where they are, try to engage with them and say, hey, look, have you thought of it this way? Have you thought about our country this way? And I bet you'll find some middle ground. I think the action points we can do is go to local school board meetings. Yes. I mean, that is one of the most important things, because this battle is being fought in our schools with our young people. There's a book out there that's being put all over the country called Stamp for Kids, which is just, in my view, it's an awful book that teaches these sorts of concepts to kids. And we've got to be fighting against that every single day, especially at our school boards, at your county commissioner meetings, at your city council meetings. You know, be holding these elected officials accountable and making sure that this stuff is not infiltrating our school system, because that's where the fight is.
How can people find you online or on Twitter?
People can find me on Facebook, Harold Eustache, on Twitter at Harold Eustache. I'm open to hearing from anybody. Yeah. Because this, I'm passionate about this fight because, our country we're at an inflection point, I think, in some ways.
Yeah.
And these battles are going to be, however this turns out, is going to be important to where our kids and grandkids are. Years ago, I remember Patrick Moynihan, that was a politician. He said, all politics are local politics. And that's why go to the city council, listen in on the school board, get involved, because one of those unique ideas is self-government, isn't it? Right. Right. I mean, our rights are. We the people are the government. We the people
yes.
Are this country, and so we've got to stand up and make sure that that the government is not telling us what to do, but that we're telling the government what to do.
Harold Eustache, thanks for being on Truth for a New Generation.
Thank you, Alice.
Folks, stay tuned. We're going to come back, and we've got the biblical bottom line, and we've got some ideas to help all of this come together as you understand critical race theory and respond to this very serious threat to our freedoms and our nation. Don't go away. We're back after this.
I just returned from a conference at the Cove, and it was absolutely breathtaking in every way. The mountain views, the tranquil areas within the woods, and just being alone with God. Mornings spent watching the sunrise from a rocking chair with coffee in one hand and my Bible in the other. Evenings spent reflecting on the incredible spiritual teaching. It's the embodiment of peacefulness. Come and experience the Cove for yourself.
Critical race theory. As you can see, this is a very influential and I would say very dangerous philosophy loose in our world today. Hi, Alex McFarland here. Welcome back. Let's talk a little bit about worldview. On this program, we talk so much about the perspectives, the way people view life. That's your worldview. Here in America, the worldview that birthed this nation and the worldview that has really characterized our culture for 2.5 centuries has been what's called the Biblical Worldview. Now, the Biblical Worldview says God exists, God created us, and written on the heart of all people is a moral knowledge. Now, the founders of the country, like Jefferson and Franklin and Washington, they called this self-evident truth. And that's why, and this is such a radical idea, that's why, as Lincoln talked about at Gettysburg, we were based on this idea that before God and with His help, we have the capacity for self-government. Now, critical race theory mitigates against all of this. First of all, being socialist and Marxist, CRT assumes there is no God, there is no ultimate moral compass. You as a human don't have intrinsic value and worth because you're not really made in God's image. And we're not really personally accountable for our actions. Everything is about the collective. But be careful, because if we are collectivists, you lose not only your rights, your liberties, you actually lose personhood. Critical race theory is false on so many levels. First of all, it's not logical or reasonable. Secondly, it doesn't square up with the facts of reality. It is definitely unconstitutional, but I would say this, and while I definitely believe in the rights and the value of all people, but made in God's image, CRT is ungodly. Acts 17 says that God has made all people in His image, and we, all humans, have value because we're made in the image of God and we're accountable to God, our Creator. So stay informed, stay passionate, stay engaged, but pray that critical race theory does not destroy our nation and with it destroying millions of individual lives. This is an important topic.
Like no other nation, Americans have lived under the blessing of prosperity and liberty. These gifts are part of the heritage of a country grounded in the truths of Scripture and given by God to advance the gospel at home and abroad. In these days of moral and spiritual confusion, maintaining the freedom to express our faith in the public square has never been more important. The American Family Association, working to preserve religious liberty for generations to come.
Welcome back to the program. Alex McFarland here for the Biblical Bottom Line. You know, one of the most revolutionary verses in the Word of God is Genesis 1:27 that says, God made man in His image. Male and female, in the image of God, He created them. Think about this. You are made by God. You're not an evolutionary accident. You're not some happenstance from Darwin's primordial soup, but Almighty God created each and every individual. And that's why one of the great American ideals has been that each and every individual has worth, value, intrinsic dignity. That's why there was the abolitionist movement. That's why in the early American decades on the frontier, there were literacy programs championed by churches, because to acknowledge the value of each human being, to teach people to read, to abolish slavery, Jim Crow laws, and to work to eradicate the oppression of any group or people is based on the idea that we're made in the image of God. And America has been unique in this regard. That's why critical race theory is so bad. It's so pernicious. That's the only appropriate word. Evil is because it erases the individual for the socialist ideals of the group. Stay informed, pray, and speak truth and influence others for what's real and true and godly and American. Critical race theory is against all of the things that we hold dear. I want to ask you to help support what we're doing. For your gift of at least $50, I'm going to send you 2 copies of my book, 10 Issues That Divide Christians. We go over all of these important issues about American exceptionalism, what makes our country great, what has made our country free, how you can stand for truth. These 2 books are our way of saying thank you for your support gift of at least $50. If you would make your support gift at least $75, we'll include the great Apologetics t-shirt, Better Living Through Apologetics. People love this shirt. Youth especially love it. So write to us. You can go online at alexmcfarland.com. You can give securely, and your gifts are tax deductible. Thanks for watching. Keep us in prayer, and stay tuned to Truth for a New Generation.